This is a formation breakdown. With the start of the Formations and Armament series where I covered the base mechanics, I wanted to follow up and cover each of the formations in detail. So in the first one we're going to be covering far and away the most popular, Wedge Formation. So in today's video we're going to be going over the base stats, the specialty armaments, commanders that best fit it, and how to set up your overall setup between armaments and inscriptions for success. Without further ado, let's get started. First, let's talk base stats. Wedge Formation's base stat is 5% more skill damage. So this means it's going to be fitting skill damage based commanders. And as such, because there's so many of them, there are a lot of commanders that easily sync up well with this kit. The most notable that come to mind, of course, is Nevsky, and most of the archer commanders in the game. But pretty much every troop type, with the exception of Siege, has several commanders that can use it. Infantry has Scipio Prime, you have Nevsky, Joan Prime, William. Pretty much every cavalry commander as well, with the exception of Attila and Takeda, will use Wedge Formation. And this is because the skill damage is good, but the specialty inscriptions, which we'll get into here shortly, are also good. So as far as commander roster is concerned, Wedge Formation is pretty much 90% of the rosters. So this means you're going to have a lot of commanders that need this formation. And just like any other formation, you can only get so many armaments at a time. So ultimately, if you're building this formation, you're going to want to focus on getting them through travel and dispatch as your preferred formation, probably from day one, because you're going to have to ultimately build up multiple sets of stats for each of these formations. Regardless of if you're going to be an infantry main or a cavalry main, you'll probably need a wedge formation infantry set even if you're a cavalry main, because eventually you might build a wedge formation infantry commander. But overall, this is probably the best of all the formations as well, so it's an easy sell to make it the top of your list. Next, let's talk inscriptions. So first we're going to talk about the specialty ones, because that's really what makes your formation selectable or not, because the base stats are great and the overall usefulness of it's great, but most of it's derived from the specialty. So the first one we have on the scroll is Hunter, which is a 5% bonus to skill damage dealt. And then dealing damage to a single target, you get 10%, otherwise it increased by 2%. So this means you get 15% bonus to single target damage, like Nevsky, or you get 7% to AoE, like Joan. And these can trigger independently of one another, so you can have them together and it's not going to hurt either one of them. So you'd have 15% more skill damage on the Nevsky trigger, while you have 7% more on the Joan. So this is something that is just perfect for skill damage commanders. It's not specific to single target, not specific to AoE. Just overall one of the best specialty inscriptions out of the four. Next, we have another 5% bonus to skill damage dealt. And then when dealing direct damage, there's a 30% chance that it'll be increased by 10%. So when you pair it with the last one, you have another 5%, so base 20% to single target and 12% to AoE. And then you have a 30% chance to go up to 30% damage on your single targets. This is more oriented towards single target skills, so I'd probably put it towards the bottom overall out of the four, but it's still very solid. The third one you have is Balanced, which is normal damage resistance by 3.5%, and at 80% rage, your troop deals 8% more skill damage for 3 seconds. This happens once every 5 seconds. And you can run into an issue with Nevsky and Joan because of this, because the recast of Joan Prime skill might not get this trigger depending on how quickly and how stationary your target is. Overall, this is probably above the last one, but below some of the other ones. The normal damage resistance is great for resisting Swarm, but 8% more skill damage at 80% rage every 5 seconds is a guarantee, but if you're moving in the field, for example, it's less consistent. Lastly, of course, we have Intrepid, which is just a 10% bonus to skill damage dealt. So overall, in priority, I would rank Hunter is the top one you want to get because you get 15% more single target damage. Followed by Intrepid, particularly if you use a lot AoE, you could even move Intrepid to 1. Then Unstoppable, and then lastly, probably Balanced. Just because the guaranteed 3.5% normal damage reduction is less flashy, and 5% more skill damage dealt is great. If you are going more AoE, I would recommend probably switching it to Intrepid, then Hunter, then Balanced, then Unstoppable. But overall, Hunter and Intrepid are probably your first two priorities. So if you can guarantee one, those are the two I would go for, depending on your preference. And lastly, as we're kind of talking about these inscriptions, I want to talk about the normal inscriptions. So the first thing I want to cover is I covered kind of the armament stats in the main video, which I will link in the description. But as general, for your armament stats, damage reduction is great if you can get them on inscriptions. Damage dealt is great if you can get them on inscriptions. Then health, defense, attack. So for your armament stats, you probably want damage dealt, defense, attack from bottom to top. But if you have health, defense, attack, it's also okay as long as it matches your troop type. But the rest of that I covered in a different video, and you can check out the link if you want to check that out in more detail. Inscriptions have a similar pathway where if you can get damage reduction, terrific. If you can get damage dealt, terrific. If not, health, defense, attack are your priorities. So that's where most of these top ones are. It's, more damage, more counterattack, more normal damage, movement speed, health, defense, and attack. So these top ones are more base level, but once you get down to the bottom, you have some unique ones. Like, for example, it's still such a weird thing to me that Loosed is something. So this is an example where it's not necessarily great to have an inscription because it doesn't do you anything. Because it's just a V formation inscription on a Wedge Formation armament. So active skill, 30% chance to gain 10% bonus attack. Most of these are pretty mediocre, but I wanted to cover a couple of them. Bellicose, a 10% chance to give 5% bonus to all damage dealt whenever you launch a basic attack. So a normal attack, or counterattack. So that means against Swarm, you're getting this triggered more often, which is terrific. I like this one a lot. Furious is another one. After an active skill, you get an 8% bonus to all types of skill damage and 3% to counterattack. This is sneakily one of the best ones that's not a specialty. Enraged, similarly, 2.5% more skill damage and 1% more counterattack damage. If you can get skill damage on wedge formations, those are the best for you, especially guaranteed. You want to get guaranteed bonuses over percentage chances, but if you can only get the health, defense, damage reduction, inscriptions for your armaments, that's okay too. But ultimately, if you can get some of these nice ones to tack with a specialty, you're going to be really well set off. But with that, we will wrap up our discussion on the wedge formation. Some of this I did cover in the main video, so check out the description there in our video, and you will find a link to that video if you want more in-depth mechanical stuff. But I wanted to cover the specific specialty inscriptions and the specific things that make wedge formation unique and viable as a formation. So let me know in the comments, is wedge formation your favorite formation? Do you have a different formation that you think is better? Let me know down there as well. If you want to see me cover a specific video topic, let me know down in the comments or join the Discord using the link in the description. And as always, good luck, fight well, and I'll see you on the battlefield.